Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm with Andreas Mai, who is the EVP of Business Development and Innovation for Keolis. We're in the Aquarium.
Can I correct you right there? It's Andreas Mai.
Andreas Mai. All right.
Oh my.
All right. So let me start again. Andreas is with us today from Keolis, and we'll get a chance to introduce what Keolis does. We're in the Aquarium at Moovin'on. It's the morning, and clearly I need another coffee. So let's get started.
That's all right. There's so many names here.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about Keolis. We had someone in the Aquarium earlier who was mentioning the integration and the future of transportation. Keolis is involved on multiple modes of transportation. I've never seen a company who integrates so many different angles on that question. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and then also what you see coming up?
Absolutely, happy to do that. So we operate transportation systems for cities. And if I say transportation systems, I mean every single mode of transportation that moves people around in cities. Yeah? So it starts with buses and trains and trams and subways and paratransit and bikes and scooters, you name it, or ferries even in some places. And kind of our claim to fame is really to be able to manage these systems in a way that it is very easy for people to move around in cities, but also cost efficient for cities to provide such services.
In moving forward 5 years, 10 years, what will our cities look like?
If I knew, I wouldn't sit here. No, but it's, I think, really going towards what you see very often in Europe. You have cities that basically delegate the operation of their transportation systems to companies such as ours. We are not alone in the market, but we are one of the major players, obviously. And I think to design the system in a way that it is easy for you to transfer from bus to train to get from point A to point B is really an art that is undervalued in many places, many other places in the world. And the other element of it is, I think it is easier if you have one app and one subscription that gives you access to all modes of transportation in a city. It is more palatable for people to use these systems. And that's what has happened over the last decade in Europe in particular. And we truly hope that we can bring some of this magic here to North America.
Yeah, we're talking about this app, right? The customer-centric view of making it simple and seamless for the consumer.
Exactly, but also more economic. Yeah. So if you look at what we pay for cars today, it's the second highest item on our budgets. And in some cities in Europe, you pay $50 and you have access to all modes of transportation in that city. And that gives your family much more money back to use for other more fun things. Yeah,
yeah, well, Estonia announced this week that public transportation will be free. And Laurent Brunel this morning was mentioning that out of $1 spent on transportation, only 23 is actually paid by the users. The cities are anyway investing and financing that whole transportation.
It's a point that I really like to make on many occasions, because we taxpayers pay for it anyways. Yeah? So for most of it is paid for by the taxpayer, and we are jumping through hoops sometimes to make sure that we catch all the people that do not want to pay the ticket to ride, essentially. And if you take that cost of avoiding kind of misuse of the system out of the equation, you could make it more economic just by that. And I think the other element is a city today that just looks at all these e-hailing companies, I don't name names, coming into the city. They are just swarming the cities, conquering the cities, and nothing moves anymore. If you look now, New York or Chicago are brilliant examples for this. Traffic is so bad that you can walk faster through the city than take a taxi or any e-hailing company. Yeah.
So I will use the term e-hailing company because well, let's talk about who will win. One of the e-hailing companies has announced this week that they want to become the world's premier integrator for public transportation. Keolis is moving ahead. We know a lot of it will be the ability to manage the analytical skills for the data that will be gathered, and then it's a race to actually get that artificial intelligence to be able to kick in on really good databases. How's Keolis viewing that race to have that clean data that will help you manage those systems?
I think the data is one element to make it work, but there are many other aspects, a lot of heavy lifting actually, to make things work in a transportation system. So you want to make it safe, you want to make it secure against, let's say, cyber criminals, for instance. Yeah. So for things like this, you need to monitor everything that is happening in the system. You also need to monitor the people aspect. So for instance, if you share a vehicle that is autonomous with suddenly 3 guys coming into your shared vehicles and you are being dropped off in a dark corner of the city and some of those individuals join you, you want that somebody is watching over you to make sure that you feel safe in a place like this. And so data has an important role to play here. You need to analyze all of this to pick up incidents that merit intervention. You also need data to figure out where are people that need to be moved and where do they want to get moved to, and what is the smartest way to transport either 2 people to destination or 100 people to their destination. It merits a different vehicle, and the smarts you need will be heavily relying on the data you get on where people are and where they want to move. So data has a place, but there's a lot of other things you need to do to keep the operation going. So it's not just done by the app. You need to maintain the vehicles. You need to clean the vehicles. Very important, because people don't like to move in vehicles that literally stink.
And thank you for reminding us that the operational excellence is also going to be a differentiator, right?
Yeah.
Not just the smart
Absolutely.
data. I think that's really important. We often
Yeah.
forget about it.
Yeah.
Now, you're head of innovation. Keolis is now a fairly large company. I'd like to talk about how do you keep innovating and what you've done to make sure that Keolis can continue moving fast and being fairly agile when there are hundreds of startups looking at new ways. Are you integrating them? Are you working with them? How do you organize your ecosystem?
So it's a very good point, because like I'm monitoring about 700 companies in this space, and every week I encounter new ones I didn't know about, and I get angry. Why didn't I know this company? Because they do such great things. But the art is really to pick the ones that have the most relevance for your operation. In the sense of, can we use this technology, can we use this startup to create a completely new offering? Can we use them to create a better customer experience? And it has to go through a pretty rigorous process with the operations that are sometimes stuck in their past to pick the winners and pick the ones that we want to work with. But it is important to go to events like Moovin'on, the very one we are on right now, to exchange notes, to have conversations about what's going on in the various companies, whether it's startups or larger companies like Michelin. We had great discussions here that hopefully will lead to follow-on projects. You just need to have your eyes and ears and brain in the market and talk to a lot of people to stay on top of what's happening.
Yeah, the ears on the ground, and I hear also the chief negotiator point of view of making sure the company integrates that those new.
Yeah, no, it's actually I wrote a chapter in a book, and I didn't know the title before, so I could not intervene. It's called Digital or Dead. Yeah, so it's kind of a very harsh title. Yeah, but. In this book, I make a case for we are in need of a new breed of individual, and I call them the business innovation architect. And it's individuals that are able to think across silos in an enterprise, but even more importantly, to think ecosystem, to think how can they expand their value chain, their product, with the help of partners that are there and also could be part of your offering eventually. And I think I see more and more of young people develop in this direction. If you talk to the startups just here at Moovin'on, they all kind of, whenever you talk to them, they always see a way to work with you and help you create a better better mousetrap.
And building all those links to the periphery often of
Yes.
the industry as well. Every large company is also dreaming of developing the next technology. How do you balance the internal R&D and then these kind of hotbeds of innovation outside as well?
We did what many other companies do in this space. We actually created a separate division under the topic of new mobility. And I think car makers have done it. And I think it's very important to do this because if you have to operate with the shackles of your core business, many decisions will just be guided by what you have done all the time. Yeah?
Right.
If you keep doing what you've always done, you will get what you've always got, is what Henry Ford once said. Yeah? And you need independence of these entities. You need sufficient funding to experiment because many things we do for the first time. Let's talk about Las Vegas. Yeah, what happens in Vegas usually stays in Las Vegas. But in our case, we launched a shuttle there, and it was end of last year. And on the first day, we suddenly had a crash. A truck driver literally backed into this shuttle, and you can imagine what happened.
First
the
day.
media just swarmed to this thing, and we had headlines, autonomous shuttle crashes on the first day of operation. But it ignored the simple fact that it was the human that made the error.
Right.
Yeah, and things like this we did for the first time, and we found in our friends at in Las Vegas, we found a team that was willing to work with us, to experiment with us, knowing that we've done it for the first time. There is no shuttle in operation on this continent in mixed traffic, so we had to roll with the punches and made it happen. And this ability and willingness to experiment and to find solutions rather than just talk about all the problems that lie in your way, I think is an important capability.
Capability and mindset, right?
Yes,
In terms
yeah, yeah.
And that's what's hard to change in companies. One other words, you made a whole list of the different transportation modes you're using. I haven't heard drones. I was reading yesterday that China's looking at cargo, very, very large
Yes.
transportation modes via air. How do you view this other dimension in terms of the complexity of the transportation ecosystem?
I think it is going to be fundamentally important in the future, but kind of you always need to strike the balance with kind of what do you need today and what is ready for today deployment in what you need to fix here, and what may need a little bit more time to get deployed, to get tested, to get ready for scaling. Yes, it's important, but I think we need another 5 years for this type of transportation to get even to where we are with autonomous vehicles right now.
Come into the equation. One last question. What do you get inspired by right now? Are there any cities or countries or people you look up to and which give you the inspiration about what it could be?
Yeah. Without kind of tapping on Keolis' own shoulder, I really was impressed. I really was impressed. We just took a delegation over to France to see some of those cities that operate in this integrated multimodal system, one price that gives you access to all, one price that rules them all, you could say, actually. Yeah. And it was really nice to see how it worked and the pedestrian zones that were coexisting with public transit, trams driving in streets that were, other than that, just pedestrian areas, facades turning into white facades that used to be black facades when cars dominated the city. And I think there's a lot to learn there. Another place is my home city, Munich. I just went back and we did a beer garden tour. And it was actually faster to take a bike because they had bike path, two-way bike path everywhere in the city than to take a car. So sometimes we rented a car or shared a car to get from point A to point B, but it was typically slower. Yeah. So we ended up just using the bikes there. And that was, I think, a model that we could learn a lot from.
Very interesting in the context of beer gardens too.
Yes, yeah. It's a lot. In this, I think it all boils down to the function of we need to design cities for the citizens that live there. I said that on stage earlier as well. I think most of our cities, unfortunately, today were designed for the cars that drive in them.
Yes, you have to change the paradigm.
Yes.
Maybe that's our conclusion for the discussion today. Thank you so much for your openness and then for sharing the future of mobility with us, and good luck to Keolis.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.